In this lesson, we'll learn about the process of adding landscaping to our plans. Now, when it comes to the entire surrounding of the project, you want to also realize that just like the interiors, you're actually dealing with a career of its own. So whereas interior designers would be focused on really getting every inch, nick and cranny of this house to work well, the landscapers would be responsible for getting a proper design done with the correct type of planting, the correct volume of soil if there are any planters, and the estimates to the amount of water that's required for all of these plants. So what we are going to be doing is just basically mocking up an initial sketch design to what the planting or landscape should be looking like. So again, let's turn on the image underlay and let's get an idea of what the planting is trying to tell us. Basically, what we have as far as the internal or close to the house portion, we have a internal planter which we will have a large palm in, and then we have a couple of essential areas where we want to have planting. So next to our entrance we want to have two symmetrical large plants, and then the basic strategy is that along the entire boundary wall we have quite large plants giving us privacy and protection from wind and all that. So what I wanted to also mention in this lesson is that if you go to your libraries of blocks, you will see that there is a big choice of plants that you can use, both in plan and elevation, and you can get quite taken away with the apparent realism of almost the cartoon effect of how detailed some of these blocks can really get. Especially in plan, you can really start to cover up all of the hard work that you've been doing just by adding blocks that are far too detailed for your good. For example, these blocks here are okay because I've selected them, but there are much more detailed than some of the other ones which we're actually going to be using. The ones that I really like are just the plain outlines and the plain circles and the very simple ones like this that give us an idea in our minds that there is a tree and we understand perfectly well what it represents. And I find far too many people are just trying to go the realistic route by adding realistic people with realistic creases in their clothing, and no one is really going to perceive or at least improve the appearance of their presentation by adding all of that detail into their work. You're really going to get 10 out of 10 on the effect of your presentation if you can very clearly convey what you're trying to represent. So that is the main lesson here, to actually try go for the less is more version of any type of solution to landscaping, interior, or whatever it may be. So I have already in your drawing that you can start with, the 26 begin file, I have pre-selected 3 plans that I think work pretty well. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this one for the large trees that are going to be doing the windbreaks, and this one is going to represent a type of shrub. What I really love about this one is that it's a very clean geometry, so if you have a very modern villa, you're not going to get thrown out by having very ugly squiggles that are trying to represent every single leaf. Now the large palm tree that we have here, and perhaps another palm tree there, we're going to represent by this symbol. But you'll see that this originally was a symbol for a bush. There would be a legend somewhere from the library that I got it from, but what we're going to do is we're going to say that this is now the palm tree, since it has this nice angular look. I think that represents a palm tree much better than having something too realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place that object onto that palm tree location, and then I'm going to decide how big it needs to be. So you can start drawing a circle, and then you can type in the radius. For example, if you would like a 5 or 6 meter wide leaf diameter, you can type that in manually and then scale up your icon to be that size. And I'm going to delete the object from underneath. So with the trees, you can see whether they need to be scaled or not. I'm going to basically place them there and refresh the page. Perhaps they could be slightly smaller, but I'm going to leave them as it is. I don't mind them being that big for now. And then this bush object, we can move that into place, and we can then fine-tune it once we start to really work on the landscape in more detail. So that's really going to cover some of these areas, giving some privacy, perhaps in these areas here. Also, we have a planter on the inside, so I think that this is a good icon to show within this planter, we can rotate it so that it starts to show, and we can perhaps copy it or change it if we need to. But I'm not going to worry too much about modifying things right now. The main idea that I'm trying to convey is about the sense of abstractness that you want to achieve and the amount of transparency that you get with these type of icons. You really don't have much interference with the project itself when you add this amount of abstract symbolism into your drawings. Since that is exactly what it is, just think of it as an icon and not as a literal rendered object that is being pasted on top of your drawings. So the next thing you want to do in terms of landscaping, the second half of this lesson is going to be about the hardscape. So the main items here are the entire driveway. And then there are a couple of areas around the pool that also need to be worked on a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do for a couple of seconds now. The main consideration you want to have when doing these type of road axes is have a look again at NewFit and have a look at what the standard dimensions and radii are for these type of turning circles. So for example, here I've already written that the radius should be no less than 7.5 meters. We should have a road that's no narrower than 5.5, and here we should have a road of 5 meters. So you can start drawing all of this in. You already have your center point, so we know that 7.5 is that radius, so let's draw that in. We know that 5.5 is that road, so let's offset by 5.5. And let's draw in the center line that we can then offset 2.5 meters. So now you see that you have these areas where you want to have a nice clean radius. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to trim using these two lines, and then the next thing you want to do is fillet. But if you just fillet normally, you're going to get a pretty sharp angle as the two intersect each other and then cut off the other overlapping edges. So what we want to do to get that nice clean filleted curve is that we want to add a radius to that fillet. So type F enter for your ordinary fillet function, and here you see you have radius of 0. So instead we're going to type R enter, or otherwise click on that radius button, and you can now type in a manual amount. So I'm going to try 2 meters, and I'm going to see the effect that that gives me. If I think that that's too small, I can enlarge it by just typing in a larger number, and I can, if I'm happy, I can then repeat it on the other side. So I'm going to now keep that radius, since it is now in my in the program, it's going to stay the same. I'm going to work on the other areas that have a similar radius to them. So since I'm working here, I see that these grids are actually in the way, so I'm going to stretch them outwards, and I'm going to push them all the way out to this area. I might pull them back in later, but for now I'm just going to leave them out of the way so I can work cleanly without any obstruction. So again, I'm going to draw my center line. Here we want 7 meters so that we have enough space to reverse and turn and do all of those maneuvers. And to get that 7 meters, you basically can start with a line that is touching the building and offset your 7 meters from there. Then you can draw the ends just by drawing a single line, and here we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to trim and we're going to fillet, and you'll see that all of those amounts are the same. Here we want a smaller radius, so F enter and R enter, and you can just type in, let's say, 2 meters, and that will give you a smaller radius to work with there. So now what you want to do is you want to create a bit of a pavement edge, so you can offset that by, let's say, 200 millimeters. And you can see that very quickly we start getting an idea of hardscaping happening together with landscaping. So there you have it. We've added the road in, so that's most of the hardscape. We still have some areas here. So for example, we have these pavers that are walking across the water. They will be sort of suspended under shallow water, and then the water will become deep at this point. So to do that, we just type REC enter, and we do the same thing that we did for everything else. We just do a size that we are comfortable with. So let's say 400. I'm going to type D enter first. 400 enter, 1600 for the width, and I'm going to move them into place and move them by 50 millimeters outwards. Then I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to use this as my base point and just copy them out to there. Then I'm going to just continue copying until I eventually get my entire distance being traversed. If you see that you have this little gap, you can either use the array tool, but I wouldn't really recommend it for something this arbitrary since the size isn't really that important. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just scale this up by eye, and I'm not really going to be, I could otherwise offset a distance of 50 millimeters so I would know exactly where that is, but I'm just going to do that by eye, since that with saving time there will actually help me by not wasting it on being far too accurate. For the edge of the pool, we do exactly as we have done for the paving here. We just offset a certain distance. This is going to be a room flow edge, so we can also draw a little section on the side to see what it should look like, and then we can draw the plan according to that. But I'm not going to worry about explaining all of that. You know how to offset and you know how to get all of those things done. So this lesson was just about choosing the right trees. That is really the crucial point, and then about adding some of these fillets and radii and doing the offsets and everything for the road. So that's what was covered in this lesson, and the next one will be slowly getting towards the sections and elevations that we're going to produce out of our designs now.